Has there ever been an entire year without war? Not one peaceful month, not one country temporarily living in safety. A full journey around the sun in which no major war continued, no invasion began, and no recognized military campaign took place anywhere on Earth. Human history stretches across thousands of years. Surely, somewhere inside that enormous timeline, humanity managed to survive 365 days without organized warfare. So, we will begin in 2026 and move backward. The rule is simple. If a documented war, invasion, rebellion, or military campaign touches a year, that year remains inside the chain. How far back will we have to travel before the chain finally breaks? The full-scale Russo-Ukrainian War closes the most recent years immediately. Before that conflict begins, the war in Afghanistan carries us all the way back to the beginning of the century. Using only 2 wars, 26 years have already disappeared. The Yugoslav wars removed the decade before that. The war in Western Sahara takes us deeper into the 20th century. Then, the Vietnam War carries the chain back another 20 years. Only 5 conflicts have removed more than 7 decades. Still, no opening. The First Indochina War closes most of the remaining period. The final phase of the Chinese Civil War overlaps it and takes us back another year. Then comes the Second World War. No surprise there. Perhaps the years immediately before it were quieter. They were not. The Spanish Civil War is already underway. Just before that, Italy's invasion of Ethiopia closes another part of the decade. Earlier still, Bolivia and Paraguay are fighting the Chaco War. The Italian campaign in Libya removes most of the 1920s. The Russian Civil War carries us back toward the First World War, and the First World War closes the years before it. But another campaign already reaches farther into the past. The Somaliland campaign crosses the beginning of the 20th century and takes us into the 1890s. We have passed the year 1900. The chain is still intact. The Mahdist War carries us farther back through the final decades of the 19th century. Earlier, Chile, Peru, and Bolivia are fighting the War of the Pacific. Immediately before it, another Russo-Turkish War closes the next years. Spain's Third Carlist War takes us farther back. Then, the Franco-Prussian War blocks the beginning of the decade. Year after year, the calendar continues to close. The Paraguayan War is already raging in South America. Before it ends, the American Civil War has already begun. Then, one enormous conflict removes almost half a century. The Caucasian War carries us all the way back to 1817. Surely, the previous year must finally be available. It is not. In 1816, a European fleet bombards Algiers. Another door closes. Before that, the Napoleonic Wars dominate the continent. Stop for a moment and consider what has happened. We have moved backward from 2026 to 1803 without finding a single break in the chain. More than 2 centuries, not one available year. From here, we move faster, but we do not leave any hidden gaps. The French Revolutionary Wars take us through the final years of the 18th century. Before they begin, another Russo-Turkish War is already underway. Earlier, Burma and Siam are at war. Before that, Britain and Mysore are fighting in India. The American Revolutionary War overlaps the same period and carries us farther back. Another Russo-Turkish War closes the years before it. Before that conflict ends, China and Burma are already fighting. Pontiac's War overlaps it in North America. And before Pontiac's War begins, the French and Indian War has already covered the previous years. There is no missing period here. Each conflict begins before the previous part of the chain ends. The Second Carnatic War carries us back into the 1740s. The War of the Austrian Succession closes almost the entire decade. Before it begins, Russia and the Ottoman Empire are fighting again. Earlier, the Ottoman Empire is at war with Persia. Britain and Spain close the short period before that. And another Ottoman-Persian War takes us back to the early 1720s. Then, the Great Northern War removes the entire opening of the 18th century. Another century is gone. The Great Turkish War closes the final years of the 17th century. The Bashkir Rebellion overlaps its beginning. Before that, Russia and the Ottoman Empire are fighting once again. The Franco-Dutch War carries us deeper into the decade. and just before it, the Racine Rebellion closes the remaining years. The Cretan War then carries us back through the middle of the century. Before the Cretan War begins, the 80 Years' War is still raging. Its name alone tells us how difficult peace was to find. The Livonian War overlaps it and takes us farther back. And before the Livonian War begins, the Italian Wars are already underway. 3 overlapping conflicts carry us from the 17th century into the 1490s. There is no hidden gap between them. The Muscovite-Lithuanian War closes the years immediately before the Italian Wars. The Granada War takes us back another decade. The Wars of the Roses overlap it in England. At almost the same time, the 13 Years' War is being fought in Central Europe. Then, the 100 Years' War carries us back more than a century. We have now crossed almost 700 years of history. The chain has still not broken. Before the 100 Years' War begins, the Mongol conquests have already transformed much of Asia and Eastern Europe. This was not one battle. It was a long series of invasions and campaigns across several continents. The Bulgarian-Latin Wars overlap those campaigns and take us slightly farther back. Before that, repeated wars between Byzantium and Georgia carry the chain toward the beginning of the second millennium. The Norman conquest of southern Italy overlaps them and brings us to the year 1000. Another major boundary crossed. Still no clear opening. The Arab-Byzantine Wars carry us from the medieval world back into the 7th century. Again, this was not one uninterrupted battle, but a long sequence of connected wars, raids, invasions, and military campaigns. The early Muslim conquests overlap that same period and take us slightly farther back. Then, we reach one of the longest rivalries in ancient history. For centuries, Rome and Persia repeatedly fought over territory, influence, border kingdoms, and control of the Near East. Rome first faced the Parthian Empire. Later, the Roman and Byzantine empires fought the Sasanians. The rulers changed, the dynasties changed, the borders moved, the fighting kept returning. This rivalry carries the chain across the beginning of the Common Era. There is no traditional year 0. The calendar moves directly from 1 BC to 1 AD. We have reached the beginning of our era. The chain still has not broken. At the beginning, the question sounded simple. Was there ever a year without war? After moving backward through more than 2,000 years, history still cannot give us a perfectly certain answer. Ancient records are incomplete. Some dates are approximate. Some names describe repeated campaigns rather than constant fighting. Countless smaller conflicts may have disappeared without leaving written evidence. But that uncertainty does not make the result more comforting. It makes it worse. We passed through modern nations, empires, kingdoms, republics, religions, revolutions, and entire civilizations. Everything changed except the pattern. People fought with missiles, rifles, muskets, swords, spears, and bows. They fought for territory, resources, belief, security, revenge, fear, and power. Time did not end war. New borders did not end war. New governments, technologies, and generations did not end war. We began this journey hoping to find a peaceful year hidden somewhere in the past. Instead, we discovered that peace does not appear simply because the calendar changes. Perhaps a year without war is not waiting to be discovered behind us. Perhaps it is still waiting ahead. History has already filled thousands of pages with the same story. The next page is still blank. The only question is whether we will write another war on it, or finally leave one year untouched.